Russia has confirmed that as of today, they have launched airstrikes in Syria against ISIS forces. But I want to be clear, this is according to Russia, it's against ISIS forces. We're going to look into that in just a little bit. It may not be what they are saying it is. But yes, President Vladimir Putin says that he's portraying the airstrikes, or that's what he's doing, as a preemptive attack against the Islamic militants who have taken over large parts of Syria and Iraq. And to the extent that that is what he is doing, the American government is largely okay with it. We'd probably prefer if Russia wasn't involved there, but if they're attacking ISIS, we say that we are in favor of it, or at least the government is. He went on to say, if they, the militants, succeed in Syria, they will return to their home country, and they will come to Russia too, which is entirely possible. And it's probably already happened. I imagine quite a few have probably gone back into Russia. Russia, not immune to Muslim terrorism in the past, of a slightly different variety, of course. But it's not crazy that he would think that that is happening. Now, is that actually why they've moved into Syria? That does not seem to be the case necessarily, and we'll show you some of the reasons we believe that shortly. But what's your initial reaction to the quick escalation between a few weeks ago, Russia moving forces in, taking control of some bases, they already had control of some bases, and now already launching the airstrikes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting because one of the things that Assad said earlier on in the day was the fact that in contrast to the United States and France, who don't have a mandate from the United Nations and who don't have a mandate from Syria, or haven't been requested, Russia has been specifically requested by Syria. So as a consequence, the implication there is that his attacks are legal, or the Russian attacks are legal, and anybody else's are not. The other thing is that he's also trodden on U.S. toes very aggressively, I feel.
Putin or
Putin,
Assad?
No, Putin, very much so, because he's basically said, when we're in the air, you guys, the Americans, need to back off. You guys need to stay out of the area. And that, again, is a unilateral decision. If it was to be a coordinated approach, then I think that would be one thing. But clearly what this is a unilateral attempt, and it's an attempt by Putin to bolster his buddy, Assad, and to strengthen his position in the region and to reassert Russia's position as a world power.
Yeah, they've wanted a sort of a showcase for their military power, which they have continued to develop during this long period where it's been mostly America in the spotlight and to some extent possibly China with some of their grandstanding. And this provides that for them.
This is just like a battle of liars here. You know, but I suspect that we're lying less because they're better at it. They're seasoned liars. And the fact that there was no effort in any way to, as Elliot said, no effort to work with the U.S.-led coalition at all. I mean, if you were really interested in getting ISIS targets, then you'd work with the people who were already doing that. And since we know that this is really Assad's only powerful ally, what I suspect that Assad was fearing is there's some good news in here, which is they're making a little bit too much progress with ISIS, which will leave just me and the rebels. So let's hammer the rebels. I mean, that's clear. It's clear what they're doing. The problem is when Ashton Kutcher, the United States Secretary of Defense, which I think was a strange choice.
I didn't even know he'd been given that honor.
Ashton Carter. Ash Carter, he's now being referred to. I don't remember that during his confirmation. But when he says that he doesn't call them liars, but he then proceeds to lay out a case to why they're lying and they're just going after rebels.
Where's my evidence?
I just, I'm just predisposed in no way to believe anything that we say here. But in this case...
Well, certainly not what he's saying.
But in this case, what we are saying seems to me to be the most likely scenario. Russia is not going to do anything in there that doesn't help Assad.
That doesn't help Assad,
and the thing that helps Assad the most right now would be the killing of non-ISIS rebels.
So why don't we talk a little bit about that evidence now. So Syrian state television quoted an unnamed military official as saying that Russian warplanes had targeted IS positions in central Syria, including the areas of Rastan and Talbasay, and areas near the town of Salamea in Hama province. Now that's according to Syrian sources using unnamed, potentially Russian sources, so a little bit suspect. Now Genevieve Casagrande of the Institute of the Study of War said that the airstrikes did not hit ISIS militants and rather resulted in a large number of civilian casualties. So that's one of the organizations that's continuing to watch what's going on in Syria. Now, why don't we bring up this map? It's going to show you where the airstrikes actually happened. And you're going to see a breakdown, a rough breakdown of the actual, it's in the green, it's in the rebel control areas. Now, they did go over a little bit into the regime control areas, but they're nowhere near where ISIS is currently operating. And so it seems pretty clear. Now, a U.S. defense official operating on anonymity said that we have not seen any strikes against ISIL. What we have seen is strikes against Syrian opposition. So to what extent it's the Syrian rebel groups, to what extent it's civilians or some mixture thereof, it definitely seems like Russia is completely mischaracterizing their current mission in Syria.
It's interesting. I don't really know what Putin's end game is here. Because if it is saber-rattling, if it is to facilitate pulling focus from the Ukraine and reassert his ascendancy as a world player, as I said, in the Middle East, where is he going to go? Because if he is going after ISIL, is he going to be any more successful than the current program of drone strikes and attacks that have been going on? And if not, then what is his purpose? The other reaction that I picked up was that the suspicion is that he's actually upset the Americans and Secretary of State John Kerry far more than he anticipated by doing this. I think the reaction from the U.S. administration has been far more aggressive and pointed and condemnatory than I think he probably thought.
Yeah, Kerry already said that we would have grave concerns if it turned out that he was going in there to attack the Syrian opposition.
So I don't quite know where he's going with it, other than, as we said, just to perhaps...
propping up an ally.
Propping up an ally. But he's so strategic. I mean, it is a brilliant move in lots of ways from his point of view, but I just don't know in terms of the medium to long-term gain what he's going to get out of it other than pissing everybody off and just shoring up a despot who the rest of the world condemns.
Yeah. I mean, it might be, my view is Syria is currently one of the easiest, most direct routes if you wanted to go into either Europe or into Russia possibly. It's an area of chaos, chaotic borders that ISIS and related groups could use to get through. So allowing Assad to regain control of the area is certainly something they could do.
Yeah,
no, but
he made sense that if he sensed real weakness there or real potential terrorist threat through ISIS to Russia, then from their point of view, we're hamstrung because we think, well, we can't support Assad. We can't just pour military and weapons and prop up this regime. That's not what we want to do. They don't care. They have no beef doing that, which would make at least his claim moderate, half legitimate, which is not that I'm propping up Assad, but that, hey, I'm worried about ISIS and this is the best way. And I don't care if you guys don't like him. I like him. This is what happens, though. One of the things of the many things that could happen when you sort of have a, and I don't even know that it was the wrong policy, but it was certainly a ill-defined, scattershot, unclear foreign policy in Syria.
From the U.S.'s
point of view, which left gaping holes for a power vacuum to be filled, and eventually, it would appear, Putin was like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah. Now, currently, it does seem like, well, they say it's going to be limited to the airstrikes. Putin did say, we certainly are not going to plunge head-on into this conflict. First, we will be supporting the Syrian army purely in its legitimate fight with terrorist groups, although, again, they're currently fighting against the opposition. Second, this will be air support without any participation in the ground operations. Now,
well, if he said it. Then,
if he said it, and certainly that was true in Ukraine, it could be that they will move on, that in a month or in 6 months there will be Russian troops in there. And I can see where he would think that their lack of concern, their relative lack of concern compared to the United States in terms of collateral damage, would allow them to possibly do more damage to ISIS. But we also know how ISIS recruits. And indiscriminate Russian attacks against civilian populations in Syria could very well lead to, I mean, after all, if we look back in recent history, does Russian forces in the Middle East would never lead to more militant religious extremism? That couldn't possibly happen. At least for right now, they're not going into Afghanistan, they're limiting it to Syria, but I could definitely see this cementing Assad's rule, getting rid of what remains of the opposition, but also possibly entrenching and leading to a longer-term recruitment strategy for ISIS.
I mean, the other thing that's just occurred to me is that this escalation, it complicates an already highly complex situation and adds in the threat that this could, I mean, God forbid, John Kerry was talking about deconflicting, and there would be no efforts to deconflict the area, and that's jargon for really military-to-military coordination.
Yeah.
But God forbid that there's ever a miscommunication or a mistake, and in this present situation, Russian troops somehow, or Russian planes somehow shoot
down one of our
a
planes.
US plane or something
Yeah.
like that. Or there's some
That's not
close-
impossible.
And then it becomes something very, very different very, very rapidly, obviously.
I mean, after all, we remember the plane that was shot down over the Ukraine. Now, that was not a U.S. Plane. It was not a military plane. But mistakes happen when Russian forces are operating in the area, and so that's certainly not
Mistakes
impossible.
happen when U.S. forces are operating in the area.
That's true.
I mean, we're presuming that it's somehow.
I'm talking about specific planes being shot down by mistake.
That's going to be. It would be Russia's fault. Like,
Yeah, I guess the point I was making and not doing a very good job of it is the escalation in tension and the escalation in intensity in the situation has just been, it's just happened. It's ratcheted up.
Yes,
when I
totally.
thought, from an outsider's point of view, you think, well, how could this get any worse? Well,
that's
today
how,
it has.
Yeah,
That's
that's
true,
right. That's right. Yeah, you just can't leave a place, a tinderbox, for this long and not expect that something. This is one of the many things that go wrong. But this guy who is eager, always eager to assert his military muscle and his power, and to talk the way that to behave in the manner that conservatives have taken to talking about him.
Yeah.
Look at him. That's what, you know what they're going to say. He filled the void. He can't. He's going to get the job done. You know, I mean, this is a guy, almost the most un-American person in the world is Vladimir Putin.
And anti-American.
And they love him.
They love him.
Like taking his top off.
He does also like,
Does like to take his top off and swim with dolphins.
He does, yeah.
Back in the day, that used to be an American thing. But then we discovered fast food and processed sugar.